Welcome to The Explainer. So it feels like we spend our entire lives chasing financial independence, right? We get totally caught up in modern hustle culture, basically assuming that more money automatically equals more safety. But today, we're taking a super fascinating look at some of the world's most influential ancient wisdom literature. And here's the twist. This text treats that exact pursuit like a psychological trap. These aren't just simple moral guidelines. The source text we're breaking down today gives us a profound, honestly almost clinical, breakdown of how stacking up money creates these powerful illusions in the human mind. We're going to trace the path from the exact moment wealth arrives straight through to the mental traps it sets up for us.
Which brings us to the ultimate question. Does wealth actually buy security, or does it just create a mirage? I mean, we literally structure our whole modern existence around getting financially independent, assuming a higher net worth means a much higher degree of safety. But the ancient texts we're looking at today, they challenge that modern assumption completely head-on. Okay, let's dive into this and see exactly how these sources dismantle the idea of financial security.
The foundational premise of our source text starts with what they describe as the rise. According to this framework, a really intense tension kicks in right at the exact moment of financial success. The text asserts that as wealth accumulates, rather than giving you actual tangible safety, it instead gives you a false sense of security. It triggers this totally unexpected psychological shift. So the arrival of money isn't actually the end of your worries. According to this literature, it's literally the beginning of a profound mental distortion.
So let's look at part one, the peak of success.
What actually happens to the human mind when it finally hits that highly sought-after financial summit? Well, the text suggests something incredibly visceral. Our first specific ancient text is 1 Timothy 6:10, and it states, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil." Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Just notice the incredibly vivid imagery the author uses there. It doesn't just casually say that chasing money makes you sad, it uses the metaphor of literally piercing oneself. It's an active, self-inflicted wound. The text is framing the eagerness for riches not as some great achievement, but as an actual instrument of psychological harm.
So the crucial point is that this text operates almost like a stark mathematical formula. The root, which is the love of money, directly equates to many griefs. Now, it's really vital to understand that the text isn't necessarily condemning the currency itself, It's condemning the human obsession with it. The desire itself becomes the weapon. By prioritizing this eager accumulation, the individual is basically systematically dismantling their own well-being. They're trading their peace for a very specific type of anguish.
Moving on to part two, the master conflict.
Having established that the love of money is a root of grief, the source text moves on to explain why it causes so much internal damage. The core argument here is that wealth actually mutates from just a neutral tool into a demanding, controlling force. And this brings us to Matthew 6:24. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. The text presents this as an absolute psychological law. The author leaves zero room for middle ground here. It introduces this fascinating concept of divided allegiance, arguing that neutrality is entirely impossible when you're pursuing wealth. You are either controlling it or it is controlling you.
And this brilliantly illustrates the binary nature of this ancient warning. Just look at the two sides here. The text basically frames wealth as an incredibly jealous entity that is actively competing for your total devotion. If you lean toward side two, serving money, the text argues that by default, you end up despising the alternative. Wealth in this specific framework absolutely demands to be the ultimate priority. It dictates your time, your ethics, your mental energy, effectively becoming a master that completely rules over your decision-making.
That brings us to part three, the psychological trap.
We're now entering with the text outline as the absolute most dangerous phase. This is where physical reality gives way to a captive environment that exists entirely within the human mind. To really understand this trap, we look at Proverbs 18:11. The wealth of the rich is their fortified city. They imagine it a wall too high to scale. This is just a profoundly observant piece of psychology. The absolute key to unlocking the true meaning of this wealth mirage is sitting right there in the word imagine. The text totally acknowledges that the wealthy person feels safe, they feel like they're inside a fortified city, but it explicitly points out that this unscalable wall is entirely a product of their imagination.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how this false reality breaks down into three very distinct components. You have the wealth,
right? That part is real. You have the concept of the fortified city, which represents their perceived safety, but the third component, the unscalable wall, that is a total fabrication. Think about it. A sudden stock market crash happens. Health fails. Relationships break down. The text is pointing out that literally no amount of money can build a wall high enough to keep out the harsh realities of human existence. Yet the wealthy mind completely traps itself by believing that it can.
Let's just take a quick second to look at the analytical structure of the text we've covered so far. We can see a really clear progression here. First, the root phase leads straight to the consequence of many griefs. Then, the warning phase results in divided allegiance, or despising one master. And finally, the trap results in imagined security. The text maps out exactly how each stage of wealth accumulation inevitably triggers a specific, really negative psychological consequence. It's this cascading effect where the initial desire for money just ends up building an invisible prison of false safety right around the individual.
And that leads us to our last section, Part 4, the final reality check. So, if wealth creates this totally false wall of security, what happens when a person simply tries to outrun the problem by acquiring more and more? Well, the ancient texts drop the ultimate, extremely sobering reality check on unending consumption. The author of Ecclesiastes, chapter 5, verse 10 writes this: "Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This, too, is meaningless." The text here imparts this incredibly sobering, hollow reality. It's describing an endless, exhausting cycle of dissatisfaction. Basically, it argues that the appetite for money grows at the exact same pace as its acquisition. It's kind of like drinking salt water to quench your thirst, right? The very thing you think is satisfying you is actually guaranteeing that you will never ever feel full.
Let's move to the next slide and see how this builds and how the futility actually compounds. This is from the very next verse, Ecclesiastes 5:11, and the logic here is incredibly sharp. Step 1, your goods and your wealth increase. Step 2, the text notes that as your wealth grows, so do the people and liabilities that consume it. We're talking taxes, staff, maintenance, acquaintances wanting a piece of the pie. And finally, step 3, the ultimate futility. The text asks, what is the actual benefit to the owner? And the conclusion is that the only real benefit is simple looking at it, just feasting your eyes on it. The practical utility of the wealth vanishes, and it leaves the owner basically just observing a massive pile of resources that they can never fully use.
We've seen how these ancient texts just systematically deconstruct the mirage of wealth. I mean, from the piercing griefs of its pursuit to the demanding mastery it requires, right down to those imagined walls of security and the totally meaningless cycle of endless accumulation. So, turning this profound metaphor back to you for a second, what do you view as your fortified city? Are the walls you're building around your life made of genuine security, or are they really just a psychological mirage? It's definitely a question worth examining.